At the C. Lazy U Ranch in Granby, Colorado, Amy Cullen worked her way up from the most basic position to eventually become the Director of Equine Operations. Amy has performed various services for ranch guests, including leading trail rides on private land and BLM land, teaching and educating guests on the skills necessary to ride horses in the mountains over difficult terrain, educating guests on surrounding wildlife and ranch history. Nothing about her previous life as a lawyer prepared her for what she would face when she was confronted by a real-life, out-of-control wildfire. Amy shares that experience in her book, Running Free, and she invites us along for the ride on this week's Cowboy Up podcast. Hello, Russell. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to talking to Amy because I know her from Dude Ranching.
Do you really?
Yeah. No, we don't know each other well. She's in Colorado. I'm here, but we see each other at Dude Ranch conventions. So.
Well, I know you love Colorado, and so does Laura.
Yeah. No, we love the West.
You love the West in general, but there are places that you are really, really very fond of, and I know Colorado and Wyoming are two of your favorites.
Yeah. No, there's no doubt. And C. Lazy U, you know, I said to you offline, and we'll let Amy talk about C. Lazy U. If this was 20 years ago, I think if somebody asked an informed person what's the top dude ranch in America or the top three, C. Lazy U would have made every informed person's list. I mean, there's been a lot of, by dude ranch standards, a lot of money thrown at some other ranches that you know, have gotten some, you know, 5-star reputations and acknowledgement, and they're good too. But C. Lazy U's been doing this at a very, very high level for a very, very long time. So, but anyway, we're here to talk mostly about Running Free with Amy Cullen.
How are you, Amy?
I'm good. Thank you guys so much for having me.
I appreciate you taking the time. So, you know, your story, your metamorphosis to coming to become a writer and, you know, you being Director of Operations at C. Lazy U is quite, it's got a few twists and turns in it.
Yeah, for sure. It's a pretty fun story.
You know, I mean, I know you're a lawyer and you've got so many other things going on. Can you walk us through how this all got started?
Yeah. So I graduated law school 2004, and I went to the C. Lazy Ranch on vacation with one of my girlfriends who had gone there as a child, and I had grown up horse showing with her. I'm originally from outside Philadelphia, went to law school in Washington, D.C., so she brought me to a dude ranch, and it was kind of funny. I initially didn't really have much interest in going. You know, we owned horses. I showed all the time, and I was like, why are we going on a horse vacation? But I went that summer. We went for a week in August, and I had hands down one of the best vacations, riding and just, you know, being out west and in the mountains that I had never realized was even possible. So we, you know, kind of booked every year and kind of did this girls trip to the ranch every year, every summer. And I started kind of toying with the idea of wading into the Colorado bar. At the time, I was barred in DC and Maryland, and luckily Maryland had reciprocity with Colorado. So I could wade in without taking another bar exam, which was a huge plus for me. I didn't really want to sit through another bar exam.
No.
So, yeah, I kind of took a big break. What started was going to be 6 months to just kind of ride horses in the mountains and, you know, do something a little different. About 13 years ago, I've been at the ranch now. It'll be 13 years this May. So I never went back.
Wow. You never went back.
Never went back.
Yeah, I won't use her name because she might not want this out there, but a lawyer friend of ours keeps saying, can't you find me a job here? Not one at your standards, not really. You know, it's funny, we talked to a lawyer who wrote a book last week, and I forgot to ask him if he still liked being a lawyer, because I've read the statistic 80% of lawyers don't. And Were you looking to leave law, or were you just drawn away by the horses in the mountains and dude ranching?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really looking to leave. I was lucky. I worked for an amazing firm and a really amazing partner. And I did not like it. I just was really over, living in the DC area, sitting in traffic. I had my horses out in Maryland. So I was like, if I'm going to work this many hours, I want to be in a place where I can enjoy my free time a bit more and not just always be sitting in traffic, to get to the barn after work and all the things. So the intention was to get my license in Colorado and then join a firm in Denver. But that 6 months, like being out of an office and, doing horses where I wasn't just horse showing, it was just so great that I kept pushing it back, be like, I'll get a job maybe later. And, maybe I'll look next year, and here we are.
And it's been a minute, hasn't it?
Been a minute, yeah.
So you left a hard job for a possibly harder job. Am I Director of Operations, correct? Is that your job?
Yeah, I mean, I've bounced around a few titles. I started as just your seasonal wrangler. I think I made $9 an hour at the time. And then
that was big money 13 years ago.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have made that here.
I think that's probably a little bit less than she was making as a lawyer.
13
a little
years
bit,
ago.
yeah. And, it's fun. Like, I went from having like my own place, in the city or in Maryland, and then I was like living in one of those like, very standard like bunk type houses with a bunch of other girl wranglers, and a bunch of us kind of packed into a room. And I was a little bit older than everyone else, so I thought it was great. It was just fun. And then, so then I was an ops manager. And, I obviously do horses, but at that point I was kind of learning all the other pieces and parts of the ranch, like housekeeping, we have a store, a spa, food and beverage. And then I became a director of operations. And then, probably 5-6 years ago now, director of the equine operations. And, we have, it's a pretty big horse program, in addition to just being like a guest ranch where guests can come and go. We have a membership program, so people actually own second homes on the ranch. So we have a boarding program, a lesson program. We do clinics and all the trail rides and, cows and all the things that you also do with like your guest ranch as well. So
how many guests does the Lazy regular transient guests come? How many is capacity?
Yeah, it's about 100. We can go up to about 100 in the summer, give or take, depending how it all like plays out with the cabins.
Sure.
And then you have all the members and then all the member guests on top of it. So it gets, you have weeks where it can be quite busy.
Well, we're about to get, we take about 125 if we're, like you said, depending on how all the rooms line out. And so we're entering that part of the year. It's so we don't have the members though, thank God. But
yes.
Not commenting on your members. I think that would be a challenge in itself. So what led to the book?
So, it was interesting. Like, I've always really enjoyed writing, but I'd never done any sort of creative writing. And I want to say like 2018 or 19, I forget the exact year, I got published in more or less like a big hunter jumper magazine about basically my story, leaving the ranch, hunter jumper world, to work on a dude ranch. And it was interesting because I had so many people reach out to me, like from that article, like, how did you do it? Like, I want to know. And I was like, okay, maybe there's something here. And then we had a big fire go through the property in October 2020. And so after the fire, which, the book has a lot of facts that happened to the fire, I just kind of started writing down everything that happened. And before I knew it, I had written, close to 80, 90 pages, but it read honestly like a legal brief. It was very, to the point, not a lot of creativity. So it took quite a while to kind of transform it into something a little bit more creative that people would actually want to read. And I, in the back of my mind, I thought I always wanted to write something. So that's kind of how it started.
So you needed to get to the point where it was less appellate brief and more an actual something someone wanted to read.
Yeah, the first couple of drafts were not that great. They really, but it evolved.
I would say. I would say. So that was your the fire was your more or less your inspiration?
Yes, it was. I felt like, I'm being from the East Coast, like I had never experienced a wildfire, or any sort of natural disaster at that point, and like kind of living through that, and to relocate, we have a little over 200 horses, and we had to relocate them twice, and it was just this massive effort, and the community involvement, all the things that happened. I just felt the need to kind of put it down on paper because it was just so surreal, and there was a part of me that wanted to be able to help people that maybe would go through something like that. Because I was definitely a little bit over my head for several days during the fire, being like, what are we doing? Like, how are we going to actually get through this? You have flames coming over the ridge. It at times felt like I was like in some sort of crazy movie, with how intense the fire got. And that was really what inspired me to want to put it on paper.
Well, I've never dealt with that at that end. I've dealt with wildfires being from California. But one of the things that Russell has said before, and I'm going to get this wrong, and I'm sure he's going to help me with this, is when you're in that situation, I think you call it the ranch is in charge or the ranch is the boss.
We always say, we say the ranch is the boss.
And at that point in time, the horses are the boss, aren't they?
Yeah. And like I said, being from the East Coast, I really didn't know. And I learned very quickly that the second you go under pre-evacuation, even if you think you're fine, you start to move your horses or your livestock. And then finding a place to put 200 horses in a neighboring pasture, that was a feat in itself. And then we had to do it again and get them, we're up over Berthoud Pass outside of Winter Park, Colorado. So we actually took them over the pass closer to Denver towards Evergreen to just get them out the second time.
And when you say the second time, you took them somewhere and then they had to be moved from there, or you took them back to the ranch, had to move them a second time?
No, so we evacuated them to one of a neighbor ranch that was out of the pre-evacuation zone.
Got it. Okay.
And then that pasture went under evacuation.
Got it. And where were you the first time? Were you in that same area, that Granby area, or?
Yeah, no, we were still in Grand County. We kind of were a little bit closer to Winter Park, down the road.
How close did the fire get to the ranch?
It went through the ranch, so it burned our big historic barn. We lost a guest cabin. We lost 2 staff housing units. We lost 8-member homes. We lost all of our hay shed. We lost all of our fence lines. Not all of them. 2 of our meadows were in pretty good shape, but for the most part, it's a 8,500 acre ranch, and it went through the whole thing. And our historic lodge, that didn't catch on fire, but the building right behind it caught on fire. The fire actually went up where my office is on the whole side of the building. But every cabin more or less was affected in some way and had to be renovated, either for smoke damage or for, burning, on the outside of it.
And what saved the lodge?
The firefighters actually were out, working on it. And then our big patio house, where people check in, the roof of that actually caught on fire and they put that out. So yeah, I think there are a lot of people working to try to keep as much intact as they could.
I'm sure that was quite a bit to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got your, where did you go to law school?
At the Catholic University, which is in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have you, now that you're doing what it is you're doing, have you completely abandoned your law career?
Yes. I'm actually barred DC, Maryland, and Colorado, and I'm inactive in all three of those states.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big step.
Yeah.
Giving up a professional license like that, like I said, if nothing else, going inactive, that's not easy. So
yeah.
I deeply respect that, because I hold a professional license in California. It was a little difficult to. I relinquished my license because I realized I'm not ever going to do that again, and that there was some angst involved in that. So when you went through law school, did they teach you much in law school about how to negotiate with horses?
No, and it's funny you say that, because one of the reasons I wanted to go to law school is, in hunter jumper world, like I was buying and selling horses, and, you're always leasing, or at that point we're importing horses, overseas. So I thought the whole point was I wanted to do the legal side or business side of horses. So I wanted to have that degree to do horses. But like anybody that graduates with student loans, I pretty much took, the job that paid best money. And, ended up doing what I was practicing was I did a little bit of estate and trust and tax work, but for the most part, I did litigation and medical malpractice defense litigation. So my firm worked for a lot of the hospitals in and around the DC, Maryland, Virginia area.
Oh, so if you're doing medical malpractice, you're busy.
Yeah, I was busy. I was always, doing something for some sort of case. Yeah. But I still had horses, and I was still showing and, riding, but it was not my profession.
Kind of hard to straddle that line, isn't it?
Yeah. The better I got at my job, the less time I had for horses.
Yeah.
The last lawyer we talked to, he's talking about he does death penalty work, and he said one of his cases came with 20 banker's boxes. He said he doesn't have associates. He reads it all. He reads every bit of it himself. So I'm going to give us a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Stephen. And thank you, Amy. This is going to be a fun program. Eager to hear more of the story. My name is Stan the Radio Man. I'm the leader of the Cowboy Spirit Radio Network. And about 5.5 years ago, I was able to convince Russell True and Alan Day that they ought to do a radio program. And they didn't know about that, but it turned out to be, as Alan said, one of the best things that ever happened to me, particularly in my senior years, where I could tell my stories to all kinds of other people. And that program continues on today. Hey, we want to take this time to salute one of our sister podcasts. Right now, many of you have heard the news that the esteemed actor Val Kilmer passed away this past week. Well, Val Kilmer was an incredible actor, and particularly many of people know him from the famous Tombstone movie. Well, we are very much familiar with that, and so in effect, our program done Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook and Bob Bosbell of True West Magazine, they have put together a tribute to Val Kilmer. And it really is a wonderful program, so I'm going to encourage you, my friends. Okay, sometime this weekend, just go to your podcast platform and look up the Arizona Roundup podcast. The Arizona Roundup podcast. And right there will be the story of remembering Val Kilmer. I would encourage you to take time to listen to it. It's a wonderful story, and I know you will enjoy it. Once again, that's Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook from the Charlotte Hall Museum, one of our sister programs, and we're proud that we all come together to keep the Western tradition alive.
We're back with Amy, and something that I always like to ask authors, because there's always a blend in any book like this, especially a book that's published as a quote-unquote nonfiction or as a fiction book. There's always quite a bit of fact woven into this fabric. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's definitely fiction, but it's based around fact. I mean, the facts of the fire are all true. And, my journey from East Coast hunter jumper lawyer to Dude Ranch world, that's all true. But I did make up all the characters and some of the storylines in the book. That's all fictionalized.
Okay, so you made up some of the characters. Were they based kind of loosely on some of the people you knew?
Yeah, that was actually interesting because that was one of the things I struggled with, was writing about myself and writing about people I knew. But what I kind of did was take personalities of many, many people, like kind of over the years, and make characters out of, different situations and things that have people I've known. But it's all based on, some of the girls that worked for me. But I've been doing this for a while, so there's quite a few different personalities that would make one character.
Well, in getting to the place where you're at, and what I've just learned is you basically started at the absolute bottom and you learned everything as you went along.
Yeah, yes, and that's another point. I don't think anyone can prepare you to work with that many horses and that many people and interact with that many guests. Like, you have to be in it to understand it. And I was a guest too, so I also had the perspective of being a guest, which I also think helped me, because I remember how much fun I had. And so the idea of creating that much fun for people that have never come before, that was, really a big part of it as well.
I think that's a very true statement. I'd really rather, frankly, have your background come to work here. I'm talking about back 13 years ago when you were a hunter jumper person with a guest history, than I would somebody who views themselves an expert in some capacity in the horse world. And it's such a diverse world. I've never understood why anybody thinks that their expertise in one area, like I know nothing about hunter jumper stuff.
Yeah.
I know what it looks like because I've watched it, but that's the extent of my knowledge. I was involved as an operator in a horse in a racehorse track, and I still don't. That's a very special. Horse world is so diverse, and I think that people that are, say, horse trainers or cattle ranch based cowboys, cowgirls. They're challenged to make the adjustment to the business you and I are in, because it's just a lot different. If you come at it from the guest perspective, you're at a gross advantage, I think. And if you have the horse experience to tag on, then you're off and running, and that's why you've been successful, undoubtedly.
You're 100% right. And it's funny, when I first started, like, I had never, thrown a Western saddle, tacked up a horse in Western tack. And that first, 3-4 weeks was tough. I mean, the English saddles are so light. And then all of a sudden I had to learn how to throw these big, heavy saddles, and quite a, we tack up a lot of horses.
Yeah.
And so, and if you watch me ride, you'd know I come from an English background. My stirrups are probably a hole or two too short, the arch in my back from all that equitation. So it definitely, it definitely took a while to kind of, and, working with that many horses of all different sizes and breeds and temperaments, I had my show horses, or the horses I owned or, would catch ride, but it was a lot to learn. And then to get out of an arena and ride in the mountains and, come across wildlife or, bees or whatever you get when you're trail riding, I had to learn about all that too.
Well, it's literally like nothing else. And, it just, you have to come into it with an open mind and learn from those who've been there, because it's horses and people, but it's a special mix and a special a very certain approach and is needed. And I've seen people just absolutely fail. This is one of my stories. We had a guy, he was 10 times the horse trainer I would ever assume to be myself, and absolute horseman, totally legitimate, good with the people, good with the horses, mediocre wrangler. And he came to me one time and he said, Russell, we have this wonderful guest. She's about 40 something and she's trying to learn to lope and I can't teach her to lope. And she wants to go on a fast ride. She's frustrated. I'm frustrated. And I said, okay. And he goes, I just want to hand her over to you. And this is 30 years ago. So I went out and I caught a horse named Navajo and I put this woman on Navajo and I loped her up and back down the arena and she was ready to go. And it was like a game changer. And so he said, well, what did you do? And I said, well, you saw what I did. I changed her horse. And I said, you could strap a champagne glass on Navajo's back and go for a ride and come back with 3/4 of it there. I said, she just needed a smoother, easier horse to ride. And he just didn't, because he wasn't, he didn't come from that angle. He didn't come from a guest perspective or a wrangler perspective. But anyway, just a story you probably shouldn't have told. But
I don't know. I'm gonna kind of rat on Russell a little bit here, Amy. You said before the break that you were blessed to have this wonderful crew that you work with.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here and I've watched Russell here, and sometimes I don't think he thinks I'm watching him, but I am. And I watch when you all put together these crews that are amazing. And it's the fact that you're putting them together and you're teaching them how to do what it is they do. It doesn't happen by accident. And they certainly don't walk in off the street knowing the things that they know. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they might be able to ride really well, but then, like I said, then they have to be able to teach gas and work with gas and be patient. It's, and I think probably very similar to Russell, like the best, the way I teach and work is like, I'm never going to ask somebody to do something that I'm not going to do myself. So I'm out there working with everyone and like kind of setting the example. And I think that helps.
100%.
Yeah.
and my wife's the same. She runs a corral now. And, if they're whining about a horse, oh, he's this or that, she just gets on them and rides them. And it makes a point on a couple of levels. Not because I'm talking to you, but when I was deep in the heart of the corral for so many years, my prototype that if I had and usually you get a lot of resumes in this business. Everybody wants to be a wrangler. And if I saw somebody from the East with an English riding background, had never wrangled, and was female, they were at the top of my list. And they just tended to, they could relate to our English riding guests, which are plentiful. They came in pretty wide-eyed on what we're doing. And, of course, those saddles are heavy, as you talked about. And they came in with an open mind to what we do, but with all the horse knowledge to back them up. So they were often running on the horse side. They didn't have to learn so much they didn't have to learn anything about horses, but they embraced, they could get off and running so quickly as a wrangler. And our head wrangler for 14 years, that was exactly her description. She'd never wrangled anywhere ever. So anyway, we digressed. I'm going to digress again. Devin Combs with Unbridled just left White Stallion. She had another one of her groups here. She does her Gestalt sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, but horse-based life enhancement clinics here. And she's often at Sea Lazy U. So we're always, and Kathy Woods Yoga, I think, is a common group that we have with you. And of course, Debbie Dunning, she won't admit it to me because she's a friend, but when she was doing her Debbie Dunning Dude Ranch Roundup show, I think Sea Lazy U was her favorite ranch because she couldn't stop talking about it. It became a little annoying after a while. And I really like Debbie, but it was, okay, I got it. They have a spa. You watch the stream go beneath your face while they rub your back. I get it, Debbie. I've heard the story. Thank you.
You don't have Russell, you need to put in a stream.
Yeah, it would just be a sand wash here. It would be a waterless river.
So you teach horsemanship above and beyond everything else you do. You also teach horsemanship.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like?
Yeah, so do quite a bit of teaching. Obviously teach, your basic riding lessons, your equitation lessons. And then probably in the last couple years, I've really kind of gotten into working in the round pen and bringing corporate groups in. And I really enjoy that, like, translating your horsemanship into what it's like to work in an office environment, or, using people's nonverbals or their personalities and how the horses are responding to that. I actually have a ton of fun with that. It's become one of my more favorite things to do. You get your, really gruff, I know everything type of, I'm going to totally typecast right now, but like your CEO that's like, I know what I'm doing, I've got this, and the horse has no interest in responding. Or you're like really meek, girl that's like afraid to get in there and like be assertive, and the horse is not going to do anything. So, all the different personalities that we have with a herd of 200 plus horses, you can usually find the horses that translate to having the guests like kind of see where they are themselves and how they're communicating with people. And it's funny, like my predecessor, who was at the ranch for many, many, many years, kind of taught me that when I was learning. Basically treat your staff the way you treat the horses. If you're putting too much pressure on them and you're being too assertive, they're not going to respond. And you have to kind of find that fine line of balance of managing and, controlling the situation. And I, like to use the horses to teach people that as well.
Okay. And it appears from going over your bio and this conversation, it seems to me that you basically started and ended your career at one level or another with horses.
Yeah. I hopefully have, I'm only in my mid 40s, so I hopefully have quite a long career ahead of me. But yeah, I started riding when I was 4, and everything revolved around horses, whether it was where I chose to go to college or law school, or where I was showing or what horses I was owning, even to currently like working the way I do and as many hours as I do. I don't know. It's because we love the horses and we love what we're doing. And the connection with horses and people was something I had never done until the ranch. And that's probably even greater than just working with horses.
It sounds like you're pretty happy with that and pretty satisfied.
Yeah, I feel like I'm pretty lucky. I have a pretty great job and pretty awesome opportunities.
Well, you may be certainly fortunate, but there's a lot of courage that went into making the decisions you made.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The 5 or 6 years of school and the investment in, money. All those things are factored into the fact that you ended up working with horses.
Yeah. And it was funny when I was, telling my parents I was going to take this little break from my law firm and do this. I remember talking to my dad, and he's like, well, at least all the money we spent on riding lessons and horses, that hasn't gone to waste. So I kind of looked at it like, whether it was paying for school or paying for, learning how to ride, or it all kind of has gotten to the same point.
Well, you get to you have to invest in something.
Yeah.
And, the more time I spend around horses, the happier I am. And I don't know how much meaning there is there, but they're pretty majestic animals and they're pretty calming.
Yeah, it's definitely, when you're in the rat race of, being in DC and an attorney and you're sitting in traffic or on a plane flying to New York for something, it was just the calming of the horses. And even though we work hard and we work a ton of hours, it's different, and it's a little bit healthier for me.
Well, but then again, I would imagine if you're in the middle of a wildfire with 200 horses, I bet it's not all that calming.
So that was not calming.
I'm looking at this, and one of the premises of your book is how one woman found her soul. And I've got to think that's you, and it kind of makes sense once you've looked at the book and you have a conversation with you. You kind of put the two together, and I think it's kind of pretty clear.
Yep, absolutely. The main character in the book is clearly based on my life. It's obviously fictionalized to make it a little bit more interesting and fun to read. But yeah, there's exactly.
Now, do you still compete in equestrian events?
No, I don't. It's actually something I miss. I miss, horse showing. I miss riding English and hunter jumper stuff. But there's no way with how many horses we have to ride and how busy we are with guests. But it's still really rewarding. And I don't even know at this point if I'd want to compete again. Maybe if someday down the road, I never say never, but I'm currently not competing at all.
Okay.
Well, we'll get you down here to White Stallion. We'll go on the rope. We never jumped anything on purpose. Jump a few things on by mistake. But, the book is Running Free, Amy Cullen. It's all about the horses and See Lazy You, and it even has a character in it called Russell. There's never a Russell anywhere, so it's...
good cowboy name.
It is that.
I never thought of it that way. I just thought, well, it's kind of an unusual. I'm actually Alan Russell, but my dad got Alan before me, so I went by Russell and always preferred it. So the book is available everywhere?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. And I actually just finished the audiobook, so the audiobook will be probably coming out in a couple weeks.
Oh, did you do it yourself? Did you narrate it?
Definitely not. I worked with somebody that, narrates books. And that was a whole nother process kind of going through that. But it was interesting. I wrote the book and I read all the time. And I had so many people being like, I really want to read it, but I don't read. And when is the audiobook coming out? So that's kind of what prompted us to go with that as well.
Yeah. I've been 25 years, not fiction, but just writing down these stories that you probably have a book already full of from Dude Ranch life. And so I was talking to this guy, a publisher, and I said, oh, do they narrate it themselves? And he goes, absolutely not. He says, no, you want a professional for that. So he shut that down pretty quickly. But
yeah.
So anyway, Amy Cullen, Running Free, See Lazy You Ranch. You can go meet Amy at one of America's best dude ranches, open year-round outside Granby. Airport is Denver, right? I mean, it's how far from Denver? 2 hours?
We're a little under 2 hours from the Denver airport. Yeah.
So easy trip, beautiful country, and thanks for, if you ever get a break, come down to, we're open year-round too, just kind of opposite seasons.
Thank you, Amy.
I would love to.
Thank you,
Amy,
you guys very much. Russell, one of the takeaways I got from this entire podcast and from the book is, when you're faced with 200 horses in a wildfire, you can't just be passively involved. At that point in time, your brain, I think, makes immediate decisions on what's important, not just short term, but long term. And I think at that point in time, she probably made a shift internally that helped her understand how important the ranch and the horses were, and again, she says in the title of the book, how she found her soul. And I certainly get that, and I got that from talking to her. It's just like, this has gone from just, I take care of horses to, I take care of horses. And she does, and the horses are in charge, and they matter to her. And that was very nice to hear.
Well, Rahm Emanuel, not that I tend to quote him, said, don't let a good crisis go to waste. He was talking politically. But, crises have that tendency to sometimes give you a chance to emerge differently and better.
I would agree, and I think this is one of those times.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, and we thank you for joining us at the Cowboy Up podcast, and thank you to Russell and Stephen and to Amy. wonderful stories, inspiring, motivating, and somewhat challenging. But that's what we do here. We like to have some fun, some little bit of wisdom, insight, and truth to go along with a little cowboy humor and a cowboy wit. And we are grateful for those people who recommend us to others. So we would appreciate if you would recommend us to others, review, give us a good review. But hey, if you'd like to perhaps be on the program yourself, or you know somebody who would be a great guest, we want you to be a participant, maybe even a player, maybe even a sponsor. We would love to hear from you. So why don't you reach out to me, and I'll pass it on to Russell and Stephen, and we'll make that happen. Reach out to me at stan@witradio.net, stan@witradio.net, and I'll be more than happy to recommend you and to pass your message on to them. If you'd like to leave a direct message, just go to the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com, the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com. We come to you from the wonderful White Stallion Ranch in Tucson, Arizona. And we would encourage you to think about that for maybe your summer and maybe this year. It's going to get a little bit warmer now, but wonderful. And it's time to do that. As my wife and I were talking about some of our plans for the summer, she just turned to me and said, and when are we going back to the ranch? And that's all she needed to say. Because the ranch means one thing. It means the wonderful times and the wonderful friendships and the great hospitality of the true family at the White Stallion Ranch. So why don't you put that into perhaps your bucket list, all right? Hey, reach out to us at whitestallion.com, whitestallion.com, and they'll try to work it out for you. And if you're saying, if you got something a little bit further north where it's a little bit cooler, well, through the True Ranch Family Connection, we can probably make that happen to you, for you, and with even your whole family. Wouldn't that be a great summertime vacation? So all the best and blessings to you. Ride tall, ride safe, love one another, do good work, tip your hat, be kind. It's the cowboy way.